Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
You need to do better. So that's what I expect them to do better.
From injuries to damaged or forgotten equipment, hundreds of Canadians living with disabilities share disturbing stories about their experiences with airlines, and leaders are being called on the carpet.
They had a huge challenge of getting recognized and stuff like that. So today is a work in progress.
Honoring Indigenous veterans. And the fight for recognition here at home. Plus,
we're looking for out-of-the-box solutions. For example, the Stanley Park train. 1
year on the job. We speak with Vancouver's mayor about his priorities and challenges.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. CBC News is hearing from hundreds of Canadians with disabilities who say they have had dangerous and dehumanizing experiences on airlines. Some were injured, others left with tens of thousands of dollars in damage to precious mobility equipment. Now, tomorrow, Air Canada officials will meet with the country's transport minister. But it's not just Air Canada passengers we heard from. And as Michelle Gassoub reports, experts say the industry's regulatory framework needs to change.
We were invited to come to the ALS Awards.
In April, Phil and Lisa Gilliard flew from Prince George to Vancouver for a special ceremony. Phil, who has a rare disease called PLS, was being honored by the ALS Society. But on the return flight, there was confusion. WestJet staff didn't know how to use the lift Phil needs to get out of his wheelchair and almost dropped him. Back at home, Lisa was shocked by what she found.
I took off his coat, his long sleeve shirt, and it was all bashed. I couldn't believe that they had taken several layers of skin off. You just scraped him. I mean, those doors are really small. You guys should know what you're doing in here.
Because Phil is nonverbal, he couldn't tell anyone he'd been hurt. Lisa filed a complaint with WestJet, but never heard back. The Gilliard story is one of over 200 received by CBC News. Some said that, like Phil, they'd been injured while being transferred or left without assistance on the tarmac. Others said their mobility devices had been damaged or simply left behind. This passenger rights advocate says it'll take major financial incentives for airlines to make changes.
There is no clear language to say that if the airline leaves behind a mobility aid, this is the fine they are going to be fined. We are talking about six-digit figures that would be needed to change the attitude.
Last week, Air Canada was summoned to Ottawa following 3 CBC News stories about recent incidents on flights. Representatives from the airline will meet with the Minister of Transport and the Inclusion and Persons with Disabilities Minister. Those affected hoping to see real change.
You need to do better. So that's what I expect them to do better.
After CBC News published its story, WestJet reached out to the Gilliards and apologized for what happened to Phil. They said more should have been done. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
A man already facing murder charges has been charged now in another deadly shooting in Surrey last year. Police say Bryce Dallas Campbell is charged with first-degree murder in the death of 33-year-old David Goldstein in April last year. The RCMP says officers found the victim in his home after being shot. He later died in hospital. Campbell is already in jail, charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder in a different shooting that happened last July. Vancouver police are sharing new images of a convicted sex offender who has not returned to his halfway house over the weekend. Take a look. 58-year-old Randall Hopley is wanted Canada-wide after removing his electronic monitoring ankle bracelet and missing a curfew at his home near the downtown east side. Now, the BPD says he was wearing this dark clothing, a black baseball hat and fanny pack, blue and white shoes, and he was pulling a cart. Police now say Hopley boarded a bus at 3:10 p.m. near Main and Cordova on Saturday. He got off that bus just before 3:30 at Main and Broadway, then removed his electronic monitor during Main and 8th, just after 4 p.m. The force has received reports of sightings of Hopley from Vancouver, the Sunshine Coast, North Van, Surrey, Burnaby, Richmond, Abbotsford, Vancouver Island, and more. Police think he may be hiding out in a rural or isolated area.
None of them have panned out at this point. We don't know where he is. So essentially, the sightings that have been reported to us, we don't believe have been Hopley, but we're continuing to investigate. We appreciate the public's help.
Hopley was declared a long-term offender and served 6 years in prison after he abducted a 3-year-old boy in southeastern BC in 2011. He's also been convicted of assault and sex crimes, including offenses against children. Police believe he cut off his monitor to avoid a November court appearance on 2 counts of breaching a long-term supervision order last year. If you see Randall Hopley or know where he is, you're asked to call 911 immediately. The BC government says it plans to remove restrictive zoning to allow greater home density near SkyTrain stations and bus exchanges. Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon says cities and towns need to designate transit-oriented development areas where they would be required to permit housing that meets standards for height and density. The province says outdated municipal zoning rules discourage development of multi-unit buildings on city lots, while the expansion of short-term accommodations cuts into our long-term rental stock.
Predicting the impact of this policy cannot account for the changing nature of housing, real estate markets, and other factors. But preliminary analysis indicates that province could be seeing approximately 100,000 net new units in transit-oriented development areas in BC during the next 10 years.
The province says it will also create a provincial policy manual to help communities set their growth plans for transit hubs. Still with housing, Vancouver's Shaughnessy neighbourhood is well known for its million-dollar mansions and heritage homes. But City Councillor Christine Boyle says it is time to bring change to that area. She says she will bring forward a motion next week asking city staff to look at a range of options for building more affordable rental and co-op housing in Shaughnessy. Now, crushed between high living costs and a lack of housing in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island, more and more adults with developmental disabilities are experiencing homelessness.
A number of adults with developmental disabilities who have been priced out of the housing market and are homeless or precariously housed on the verge of homelessness.
Clients of the Clements Centre were expecting to move into a BC housing project in Duncan where they would have their own units, but when construction stopped a half a year ago, it left many of them stuck. BC's housing minister says the province is doing what it can.
It's certainly challenging to hear anyone in that type of situation. We know at BC Housing, BC Housing prioritizes people with developmental disabilities to get into housing as quick as possible.
For now, many of these residents are receiving disability payments, but it's still not enough to get housing in the city. Now, if you live in Metro Vancouver, you need to make more than $25 an hour in a household with 2 incomes just to meet basic needs. In places like Clayoquot Sound and Golden, it's even higher. That's in a new report that finds BC's living wage has spiked over last year. As Courtney Dixon tells us, pressure is on the province to do more to ease people's money crunches.
Affordability challenges are nothing new in BC, but for many families, it's getting worse.
I have support from my parents, yeah, but I think it's difficult right now. Everything is expensive.
Not making a living wage, you basically just can't do anything. You just have to work or you take on a second job.
I get paid a pretty generous wage, but living here in downtown Vancouver, it still feels pretty tight.
And now, today's cost of living crisis is being crystallized with concrete numbers. A new report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives looks at what a family of 4 in Metro Vancouver requires to meet their basic needs. Both parents need to work full-time, making more than $25 an hour. That's up 6.6% compared to last year. According to Statistics Canada, the average wage in BC is upwards of $35 an hour. But many British Columbians are earning only minimum wage, making $16.75.
They have to make impossible choices, pay the bills or pay the rent on time.
Experts behind the report say housing and groceries are considered the biggest costs in any given household. And with inflation and interest rates still sky high, they don't expect that to change anytime soon.
Our economic system is broken and we need to intervene, and we need to address these crises because this is not sustainable.
Some companies are trying to do their part by becoming a certified living wage employer. That means they've committed to paying staff their city's living wage. There are about 400 such businesses in BC right now. Greg Masuda is one of them. He owns a ramen restaurant in Courtney.
We basically just have to do the math and figure out what we need to do to raise our prices in order to be able to continue to pay a living wage.
Pressure is also building on the province to do more to improve affordability. Experts say housing, transit, and childcare are key areas where government could help people save money. BC's finance minister says they're working on it.
We have some of the highest wage rates in the country. We have one of the highest minimum wages, and we will continue to make sure that that supports people.
But experts say action is needed now so that families aren't forced to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. Courtney Dixon, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hiring more police, approving more housing, and getting rid of the fast food cup fee. Those were some of the accomplishments Ken Sim talked about in an interview with CBC News to mark 1 year since he was sworn in as mayor of Vancouver. But as Justin McElroy tells us, a recent announcement says something about Sim's leadership style.
The key to understanding Ken Sim as mayor of Vancouver is a tiny train in Stanley Park.
That's right. It's back, baby. It's awesome.
That was Sim on Monday night, announcing that the Stanley Park train, closed for most of the last 4 years, was going to reopen.
A year ago, we committed to bringing swagger back to the city, and it begins by bringing back events, attractions, and the things that our community loves and celebrates.
And because it's been 1 year since Sim was sworn in as mayor, we set up an interview with him, and we asked him the following question.
You've talked about swagger, bringing swagger back to Vancouver. You've talked about vibes. But in the first year, the price of owning a home or renting a home didn't get more affordable. Yeah. Number of people dying of overdose deaths didn't go down. Property crime rates are up 9% this year, according to VPD stats. I guess, are you satisfied with the work that has been done to date by your administration to reverse those trends, and it's simply a question of letting things play out and Vancouverites will start seeing the benefits? Or is there more work that needs to be done on a substantive policy level to achieve those aims? Well, that's a big question.
Yes, it was. But it could well be argued that affordability and safety have been the biggest challenges Vancouver's mayors have faced for many, many years. And when he answered the question, Sim talked first about how the city doesn't control interest rates or broader economic policy that helps determine home prices. And earlier in our interview, he talked about making headway on safety issues and fully funding the police department. Shortly into his answer, though, Sim brought up the train.
I'm happy with the progress we've made, but we have to make more. And we're looking, we're looking for out-of-the-box solutions. For example, the Stanley Park train.
And what were some of those out-of-the-box solutions?
We picked up the phone and we looked for private donors. And the community stepped up and we raised over $500,000 with a few phone calls. And then we got a train expert to come in to help us with the challenges that we have.
And who were those donors? They include the Beatles Foundation, the philanthropy arm of a developer family that donated to Ken Sim and ABC Vancouver last election. The Diamond Foundation, the philanthropy arm of a prominent Vancouver business family that donated to Ken Sim and ABC Vancouver last election. And the Peter and Joanne Brown Foundation, the philanthropy arm of a prominent Vancouver businessman who donated to Ken Sim and ABC last election and just was given his own day by the city of Vancouver. Now, the Stanley Park train is beloved, political donations are fair game, and you could see this as a good example of outside-the-box thinking. You could also argue that there are much bigger issues for Ken Sim to talk about when asked about systemic problems in the city. What you can't argue, though, is Ken Sim finds the Stanley Park train an example of how he is running the city in a different and better way.
We're going to have the train up and running, subject to an inspection, of course, to make sure everything's safe, this Christmas. Something that wouldn't have been able to happen if we had to follow traditional channels to approve the funding and looking just, at our current resources. And so that helps us bring swagger back.
Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Ceremonies are taking place across the country today in honor of Indigenous Veterans. Arlene Young attended Vancouver's 20th Indigenous Veterans Day and a march.
I'm standing at the corner of Main Street and East Hastings, and in behind me you can see a number of people carrying flags, and a march has just begun. This is National Indigenous Veterans Day, and we're going to take a bit of time and actually try and talk to some of the folks here along the march. Nice to see you. So first of all, why don't we tell our viewers your name and your involvement with this event today?
My name is Jamie Thomas. I'm from the Nanaimo First Nation. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1986 to 1990.
Why is it so significant, you know, as a Canadian, you're from Nanaimo, right? So to be here today?
It gives us an opportunity to use our own language, culture, and ceremony. And come together and share with the other people that are willing to join us.
And what's it like, you know, knowing the history of Indigenous people in this country? You know, we're all still working through truth and reconciliation, especially that reconciliation part, seeing the support in behind you.
It didn't start like this. This isn't something that just happened overnight. It's evolved over time. Prior to that, we weren't even recognized in the local cenotaphs. So today is a work in progress. We're looking to move forward with it, and it's always a positive aspect to see the support that we have.
I respect the boys I lost.
Yeah.
They're still in here, eh? So you don't forget them. And the young boys that are serving right now today might not ever come back.
And why is it you think it's so important that year after year we still come together and do this?
Well, I'll tell you, we're not respected and well known like most people are because we weren't allowed to carry our drums, our flags, and everything, to play our drums. So this is why we had to go to Ottawa and fight with Ottawa to give us this day so we can honor our veterans that we lost. I lost a lot of boys over there. The Aboriginal soldiers played a major role in the armed forces. They couldn't break our codes. They couldn't do that. They broke everybody else's code, but they couldn't break the Aboriginal code.
More cases of avian flu have been detected in BC. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says birds at 8 commercial poultry farms in the Fraser Valley have now tested positive for the virus.
It's a devastating thing. Like it's not just a loss of your entire business operation, basically through the entire Christmas season and New Year. It's also animals that you care about and that you've really invested your time and energy into. So it is a very mentally and emotionally straining time for these producers.
Birds at 2 small flocks in Merritt and Port McNeill have also tested positive. There are now 16 confirmed cases since October 20th. The province says it's working with poultry producers and the CFIA to help limit the spread of the disease. So were you part of the lucky few to snag a code for Taylor Swift tickets? The 3 Vancouver shows are more than a year away, but they already have some people very excited or sad. Among them, those who run unowned shops, hotels, and restaurants and hope to benefit from what is called Swiftonomics. But as Michelle Gomez tells us, some say there's little proof the star will actually bring in extra dollars to the city.
It's every Vancouver Swifty's wildest dream. The singer's coming to the city for 3 shows in December 2024. And with Tay-Tay in town comes Swiftonomics. The term, coined by a Bloomberg reporter, describes the economic impact that ripples through host cities of Swift's Eras tour. Restaurants and shops are expected to benefit all too well from the boost in tourism.
We expect the economic impact to be significant, and we expect it to be really fun and really great for downtown Vancouver. Our restaurants are going to be full. Our shops are going to be full. People are going to be having a really good time.
But one economist says overall, the shows won't make sparks fly in the local economy.
Everybody's going to have to pull that money for the outrageously priced tickets from somewhere else. So it means that they're going to have to cut back on skiing. It means they're going to have to cut back on going for sushi. There's going to be a tourist who says, I'm not going to be coming now December 6, 7, and 8. And so that's economic activity that's being destroyed. And so when you net all of these things out, it's pretty close to zero. Taylor Swift is going to do extremely well for herself. The team around her will do extremely well. But the Vancouver economy is not going to see some sort of economic recovery from a recession because she comes for 3 nights.
But one online research group says the Eras Tour is expected to generate billions of dollars in economic activity in the U.S. alone. How much will fans spend to shake it off with Taylor in Vancouver? We'll have to wait and see. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Vancouver.
For the record, Darius, I didn't get a code, didn't even try. Let somebody else go to the concert. I'm sure it'll be great.
But I didn't get one. My
No,
sister's
you
a
didn't?
big Swiftie. No.
One person in our newsroom got it, and they're already being flooded with offers of gold and myrrh.
Really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Being
I'll have to
included
ask
in
you who.
wills. Oh, yeah. It's a scene, man.
Very exciting.
Yes, indeed.
Well, it's a bit far out to tell you what the weather's going to be like during the Swift concert, because I think it's still a year away, is my understanding.
Yep.
But I can tell you what it was like over the last 24 hours, which is we've had a few showers sneaking their way onto the coast, a little bit in central BC. We had some snow flurries. But for the most part, we've been fairly dry across the province, except for those few showers that snuck their way in because of this ridge of high pressure. It's continuing to move east. Right now, it's over the interior, so we're seeing clearer skies. This is their break in precipitation. This rain that's coming for the coast now is following our ridge of high pressure that kept us dry. So by early this evening, expect that to hit Haida Gwaii and then continue overnight onto the north coast and central coast. And then as that continues to move further east, it's going to come to us probably early afternoon. Now, some models are saying it could come as early as tomorrow morning, but it doesn't seem too likely. It seems like probably noon is the earliest we would see that rain, likely not until a couple hours after that. In terms of temperatures, we're staying around seasonal pretty much across the province. Tonight, expect pretty seasonal temperatures as well, with a little bit of cloud and those showers starting, especially further north, potentially on the west coast as well, but not too likely. And then here in Vancouver, nothing but some cloud heading into tomorrow morning.
Okay, we'll watch for that. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
A recently launched space telescope sends home its first photos. After the break, Darius will be back to explain the breathtaking images and what scientists are learning. Stick around. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. A growing number of students are using free food programs at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, and an overwhelming majority of them are from abroad. Sarah Law visited the Student Union's Food Resource Center to learn more about why students are struggling.
So we're at the Lucio Food Resource Center right now. We have a wide range of supports for students who are experiencing food insecurity.
Okay, and what have you noticed in terms of demands for services?
So it has actually increased. Last September, our emergency grocery pickup program saw about 160 unique individuals. This September, it has increased to 217. 90% of our students who access our emergency grocery pickup program are international students. And so with that, we hear things like high tuition rates being a problem, as well as increased cost of groceries, food, and the price of living as well.
They might have issues with food insecurity, with housing and all of that, because they come with a limited budget and then they have to count on it. So that is what happens with internationals.
Mm-hmm. So once international students arrive here, what do you do to help them become aware of services like these?
So here we, at the International Lounge, we have different programs. Our Instagram page and social media promotes all the most of the supports that they can get, especially Food Resource Center or at the Health and Wellness Center, that they can get different support. And also, me personally, I try to always get the word out that you're not alone, you're here, we can help you out. And we appreciate that Canada is a multicultural country, but still, it's a big change for a lot of students. So being able to help them is actually really fulfilling.
So do you have ideas for solutions to make life easier for international students here in Thunder Bay?
Yes, well, the main issue right now, I would say, would be the housing crisis on top of the high tuition and fees that internationals are paying. And then the thing is, we have an increased number of international coming into the city, but that is a good thing. But on the other hand, it brings about their own issues and problems. For example, internationals are getting scammed a lot on the applications, and on the other hand, when they arrive, they don't know of their rights and like tenant rights and all of that. So at the end of the day, the basic human needs should be met here, because this is a developed country and they are expecting that. So
what kind of solutions do you want to see to make it easier for students to access affordable, nutritious food?
So I think it's important to address the problem as what it really is, which is poverty. Food insecurity is a symptom of poverty, and so we do have to start looking at it as that. Tuition rates, cost of living, and cost of food are all issues that students bring forward to us, and so we really need to look at how we can address these problems on a provincial level and across Canada.
A new telescope launched by the European Space Agency in July has now released the first photos in its mission to map the night sky. The Euclid Space Telescope is helping scientists understand our universe, both the parts we can see and those we can't. Now, the first photo shows us, there's Darius Madavi's going to tell us about it. The first photo shows us the Perseus constellation, and it's not just a beautiful image. Each of the glowing clusters is its own galaxy. We'll show those images when we can. So, there they are. Darius, tell us about this Euclid Space Telescope. Why is it so important?
Now, Euclid is in position just now in around 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth, and it's going to observe literally billions of galaxies, not an exaggeration, over the next 6 years, with the goal of creating a 3D map of a full 1/3 of the night sky, so much more than we've ever mapped before. Now, these galaxies stretch as much as 10 billion light years away, and the photos that were released today, or just yesterday, sorry, are actually just test images, but they're already incredible. So let's take a look. If you look at this first image, this is of Spiral Galaxy with a very catchy name, IC342. It's also known as the Hidden Galaxy because it actually lies behind one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way. So all that dust, that gas, and all those pesky stars make it very difficult to observe, but it's not much of a problem for Euclid. Now, this next picture is the mess of lights, the globular cluster, NGC 6397. You can see the scientists are very creative. Globular clusters are bunches of hundreds of thousands of stars held together by gravity, and this one is just 7,800 light years away, so incredibly close on space-time distance scales. This was taken in just 1 hour, which is a real achievement because in the past, we've had to take many, many different photos and sort of stitch them all together because the brightest stars will sort of flood out the dimmer ones. Now, here we have the Horsehead Nebula. You might think it should be the background for your desktop, but it is actually space, and it is absolutely spectacular. So this is where stars are born. It's a stellar nursery. This is the closest one to Earth, and if you look closely through the dust and gas at the bottom of that photo, you can see the galaxies that lie behind it, which is just a real testament to Euclid itself. And last up is the photo that Dan showed us off the top, taken in just 5 hours of observation. You can see hundreds of thousands of galaxies in this photo. And to speak more about it, I'm going to pass this off to Douglas Scott, a professor of physics and astronomy at UBC, who is directly involved in the Euclid mission.
One of those Euclid images that came out today, which is a cluster of galaxies, there's many galaxies in this cluster in the sort of foreground, and the background contains maybe 100,000 galaxies. We've never taken a picture from a space satellite with, high resolution and so on, with 100,000 galaxies in one picture.
These images are incredible, Darius. We know you love the James Webb Space Telescope. What sets Euclid apart from your old favorite?
Yes, now I love them both equally. It's like asking me to pick my favorite child, so I love them both. But as Scott told me, the big difference comes down to their scope.
People are used to pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope or the James Webb Space Telescope, and those are amazing. But they take very small pictures of the sky. And Euclid's, a single image from Euclid is bigger than the full moon. So it complements these other space telescopes. You can use Euclid to find stuff, which is interesting or weird, and then use James Webb Space Telescope to follow them up.
So while Webb's primary goal is to understand the origins of our universe by zooming in and looking at the very earliest galaxies and the birth of stars and planets, Euclid's goal is to build that 3D map in order to understand some of the most mysterious components of our universe: dark matter and dark energy. Now, these are estimated to make up 95% of the matter in the universe, and they sound similar, but they're actually completely unrelated. So First up, we know dark matter has to exist because we can observe the effects of its gravity. It causes galaxies to spin faster, even groups of galaxies, and it bends light. But that's really all we know about it for now, because Euclid can observe that bending of light in great detail, and by mapping galaxies, the things we can see, from that we can map where the dark matter has to be. Now, as for dark energy, at the moment, it's really just a name and a concept and a way for us to explain why the universe is expanding faster and faster, because otherwise physicists are going to have to revisit Einstein's general theory of relativity, so they're hoping Euclid will give us some clue as to what dark energy, if it exists, might be. So big questions all around, and I, for one, can't wait to see what we learn.
Thank you for bringing it to us, Dorius. Much appreciated. Awesome stuff.
Thanks, Dan.
The city of Burnaby has now called for a ceasefire in Gaza. We're going to hear from a city councillor on why that matters after the break.
They're old, the men who were boys who won the first Great War. As young men, they marched to fight in foreign lands. They were tall and straight and true. Some came home, some didn't. At Shaughnessy Hospital today, they gathered to remember the men who were boys and the boys who never became men. Among those who lived was Albert Howlett. He was 17, from London, when his war began. Now he's 88, and thankful that years cause memories to dim.
It's a horror thing. There were moments of boredom and quietness. The food was dreadful. When I first came back from the war and I went home, my father asked me about it and I couldn't talk about it. All I felt was a horror. Seeing people die.
Those who did come home learned to live again, in peace. But no man can conquer the passage of time, so each year they stop. They remember the friends who never came home, and the ones who did, but who have fallen since to time and tide and tomorrows. They are still proud. They are still the men who won the war. They are just a little bit older. Rick Austin, CBC News, Vancouver.
The first group of Canadians to make it through the Rafah crossing from Egypt have now made it into Cairo. Tom Perry reports.
The end of the road, but not the end of the journey. Exhausted Canadians who made their escape from Gaza arrive in Cairo safe but still shaken.
We felt like that we would lose our lives in any seconds, you know.
Fadi Abusedo, his wife and 4-month-old, full of relief to be out, full of regret for the family he left behind.
You don't know what's going to happen to them. You understand? You don't know what's going to happen to them. Like, yeah, maybe I got lucky to get out, but for them, they have no chance.
Diplomatic staff at the Canadian Embassy in Cairo today helped evacuees fill out forms, apply for visas, and find tickets to their next destination. Some trying to make their way to Canada, not sure how they'll make that happen.
In a day, I lost everything that I own. My house, my parents' house even, I lost it. My cars got destroyed completely.
Families starting over with almost nothing, but finally safe.
It's complicated. Leaving my family, my house, my friends there in the war and bombing, and now I'm safe. My daughters are safe. There's my life there.
For some, exiting Gaza comes with fear, but also hope. Yara Abu Al-Jadian gave birth to her daughter Sila in Gaza just last month. Her husband, a permanent resident back in Canada, hopeful the family can soon be reunited.
It's not a dream anymore. It's a real. Like, at least my wife and my daughter right now, it's a very safe. They are very safe and they will be joining me here.
Is there a birth certificate?
Yara says her baby has no birth certificate, just one factor that will make bringing the family together complicated. But in Gaza, nothing is easy. On the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing, more Canadians wait their turn to reach safety.
Bombing was everywhere and was randomly. And once you heard about friends and relatives who lost their lives, you still thought that you are the next.
But on this day, it was not to be. The Rafah crossing was closed yet again, with 40 Canadians unable to pass. Those 40 Canadians will have to wait and see when the border reopens. Canadians who've made it through will have to plot their next move after leaving friends, families, even entire lives behind. Tom Perry, CBC News, Cairo.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and several other MPs are calling out anti-Semitism. There has been a rise in the number of high-profile threats against Jewish people and institutions across Canada since the start of the Israel-Hamas war. The CBC's Kate McKenna explains.
Canada's Prime Minister with a dire warning.
We're seeing right now a rise in anti-Semitism that is terrifying. This is not who we are as Canadians. This is something that is not acceptable in Canada, period.
His comments follow multiple reports of threats against Jewish people and institutions. Montreal police are investigating the remnants of Molotov cocktails at a West Island synagogue and a nearby Jewish community center.
We just had a firebombing at the Beth Tikva synagogue where I grew up in Dollar des Ormeaux, and it is not something that we could take lightly. It is really important that police need to crack down now.
Quebec lawmakers are also calling for a police investigation into comments made by this controversial imam, Adil Sharkawi. He made a speech calling for the extermination of Zionist aggressors.
From my perspective, they seem to have crossed the line and gone into criminal speech, hate speech. I've never seen a time when Jewish Canadians have felt as scared, as angry, as frustrated in a country that we've been part of since before Confederation existed.
This is a terrible time in our history. The Jewish community is rightfully scared, and I never thought in my lifetime I'd see anti-Semitism like this in our streets.
Jewish advocacy organizations say anti-Semitism was on the rise before the war between Israel and Hamas, but things are getting worse.
What we see today, as we saw in the West Island, is the continued deterioration of the conditions against the Jewish community.
The federal government pledged an additional $5 million this week. It's for communities that could be targets of hate-motivated attacks. They're able to apply for funding and do things like hire temporary private security. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Prime Minister has also repeated Ottawa's call for a humanitarian pause in Gaza to help get Canadians out and aid in.
A humanitarian pause is going to allow all the hostages to be released. allow us to continue doing the work of getting all foreign nationals out of Gaza. We got 75 of 80 Canadians out yesterday, which is solid progress, but there is so much more to do. And a pause long enough to start not just getting aid in, but getting resources and medication and supports while we begin doing the work of de-escalating the situation.
City councillors in Burnaby, meanwhile, have voted unanimously to call for the Canadian government to support a ceasefire in Gaza. Few elected officials have done the same. As we just saw, Ottawa is calling for a, quote, humanitarian pause instead. Councillor Daniel Tatro brought forward that motion. He spoke with our Stephen Quinn on CBC Radio's The Early Edition this morning.
Council was unanimous, and I have to say I'm a little bit surprised about that because people seem to have very, very strong opinions about this. You all happen to feel the same way then?
I think our council feels that we have the moral obligation to stand against this violence and ask for a ceasefire. It shouldn't be controversial to ask for a ceasefire. That's what's surprising here. It's, we're asking for a stopping of the killing of the civilians. One thing that really hit home to me was I was reading a report and it talked about whole families, whole lineages, Palestinian lineages being taken out, killed, grandmothers, grandfathers, mothers, fathers, and children gone. And that hit home for me because I thought back to when I was in high school looking through my family tree for a school project and just looking at my grandparents' family tree who are Nazi Holocaust survivors, so I'm Jewish, and seeing how almost all their families were killed in the Nazi Holocaust. And it really brought home to me that this is something that we cannot let happen again. As my grandparents taught me, never again can this happen to anyone. And so I felt we couldn't sit by as what they taught me, but with my Jewish values, is that it's important that we speak up for everyone, for peace, for justice, for human rights, and for liberation. And that's why, I came to want to do something. And even just yesterday, seeing Gazan children hold a press conference, just asking the world for them to care that their lives matter as well, and that they want to live. That was just heartbreaking. And throughout the last few weeks, we've had a number of residents reach out to us, watching in horror, and they just want their elected officials from all levels to take a stand, do something, and demand a ceasefire. And so that's why I felt the need to bring a motion to our council for us to put some pressure on the federal government to advocate for a ceasefire.
Why are so many politicians so hesitant to be critical of what Israel is doing?
Again, very good question. And I think people are afraid, as you said, of the pushback. And we have seen a lot of people who have spoken out for advocating for Palestinian rights who have been silenced. And I think people are seeing that, and they are afraid. And so that's another reason why I wanted to bring this forward, to say that no, we will not be silenced. We need to speak out and for peace, for justice, and we hope this will inspire others to do so and not be afraid to speak out. Anti-Semitism is a very real issue out there, but it's important that we don't conflate the criticism of Israel or advocating for Palestinian human rights and liberation as anti-Semitism. I think actually does a very big disservice to the real anti-Semitism that is out there, that we should be fighting against altogether.
In the U.S., Democrats are celebrating some big wins after several elections last night. Abortion rights were a top issue. Katie Simpson tells us what that could mean for next year's presidential election.
Make no mistake about the will of the people. Ohio voted decisively to become the 7th state in a row to protect abortion rights since Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Abortion is health care.
In the Republican stronghold of Kentucky, a Democrat was reelected governor over a Trump-backed challenger pushing an abortion ban.
Nice to see you again.
While the Republican governor of Virginia will not be able to pass new abortion restrictions, voters there gave Democrats control of both the House and the Senate.
I'm a little disappointed, to be clear.
This issue has united a broad coalition of voters, according to this public opinion researcher.
Young people, people of color, people who are struggling, they are really motivated by abortion.
The White House is trying to take credit for the wins, even though the president was not heavily involved in the campaigns, and polls show Joe Biden remains deeply unpopular.
President Biden's values and agenda won big across the country last night.
Expect Democrats to make abortion rights a central focus of their 2024 election campaign.
The voters said, look, the government should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
This could prove problematic for Republicans. Donald Trump, who is poised to become the party's nominee for president, has bragged about picking judges who overturned federal abortion rights, while high-profile leaders, including the new House Speaker, are staunchly anti-abortion.
Americans, the electorate, are, pro-choice. Republicans don't have a messaging problem on this issue. They really have a policy and a values problem.
Democrats will point to these results as proof they can win in difficult moments and try to dismiss recent polling showing Biden trailing Trump. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Some BC beetles have gone from our coast to the other. Now the bugs are being used to help an invasive situation in Nova Scotia. You'll want to see this.
Beading is beautiful. Beading is who we are as First Nations people, Indigenous people. It is an extension of who we are. My name is Joyce Hunter, and I am a beader from Winnisk First Nation. We know that the poppy came to represent veterans and survival and of the protection of rights and freedoms, and that's beautiful in and of its own. And then for us as First Nations people, what we did when this country became a country was we took treaties with our partners, and then there were global catastrophes that happened that triggered wars, and when that happened, our people, they stepped up to the plate, and they did that to protect their treaties. They did that because they were going to honor that treaty that they took with their partners, because if the other side didn't exist, their treaties wouldn't exist. And so they signed up in order to uphold the agreement that they made, because to them it was a sacred agreement. And my maternal great uncle, he went to serve in the First World War, and he passed away actually as a result of the Spanish flu. And it's very important to me as a First Nation member to honor him and represent him and others like him well. I really like the fact that it represents indigeneity in such a strong way, and it's also very beautiful. Like people get to wear that, carry that, because, like I said, there's such a huge story behind, that fighting for that freedom, fighting for that treaty, making sure that relationship holds strong, and the protection of all those things, the respect for that. There's a lot of meaning behind it, and I think that's important.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Some BC beetles are settling into a new home on the other side of this country. Nova Scotia is hoping they will help protect hemlock trees from a scourge that's threatening to wipe them out. Kayla Hounsell shows us how.
They're tiny, really tiny, but scientists are hoping they're the solution to a big problem.
We think they're probably our best bet.
The best bet against an invasive insect that is killing Nova Scotia's hemlock trees. Hemlock woolly adelgid, or HWA, was discovered in the province in 2017.
It can move around via birds. That's probably how it got to Nova Scotia.
It's rapidly spreading across the province and is now on nearly all of the thousands of hemlocks in Kejimkujik National Park.
Little vampires sucking the tree.
HWA is on the west coast too, but it's not a problem there because BC is home to this beetle, which eats the invasive insects.
So we've established that indeed this beetle is very important at holding back hemlock woolly adelgid, and that therefore it's an ideal candidate for helping control hemlock woolly adelgid elsewhere.
So they're literally shaking the predators out of the trees and shipping them across the country.
Yep, there's one right there.
3,600 have now arrived in Nova Scotia, leading to this moment, release.
It's incredible. I mean, it's a really, really good feeling because, it can feel hopeless.
This is the first time this kind of biocontrol has ever been used here in Canada, but these beetles have been used to battle these invasive insects in the United States for more than 20 years.
One of them is already eating an HWA.
How do you know it's only going to eat what you want it to eat?
So that's a very important question. This beetle only develops on HWA. It doesn't develop on anything else.
The hope is that the beetles self-replicate to help protect these majestic trees hundreds of years old. Scientists are also treating some with pesticides. If left untreated, they expect 90% of Nova Scotia's hemlocks will die. The question now is whether the beetles can survive an East Coast winter. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News in Kejimkujik National Park.
Back in this province, Darius is back with the full BC forecast and back to the rain again here, at least on the south coast.
Yes, back to the rain for most of the coast and much of the province, although a few places staying dry in the interior. Now, what is bringing it is this low pressure system that's moving upwards up there, and that front is becoming disassociated with that low pressure, meaning it's going to come this way right through the province. So right now, it's hitting Haida Gwaii. Already we're starting to see some rain happen there, and it's going to continue moving south over the next day or so. Now, along with the rain it's going to bring, at times heavy, it's also bringing some strong winds. So Haida Gwaii was under that wind warning. We talked about this yesterday. It was in place from this afternoon and is going to continue into tomorrow morning because those winds already being seen upwards of 120 kilometers per hour, gusting that high, incredibly high winds, and they're forecasted to continue. So here we can see that these forecasted gusts, relatively sustained ones, hitting 100 kilometers per hour, and they're going to continue over the next 24 hours or so. There are some breaks, but expect those high winds to return at times as more just impulses of that low pressure system do come to the coast. Now, those really strong winds aren't expected to quite reach that speed down here on the south coast, but we will see some strong winds here as well, so be ready for that. Now here we can see those rains spreading down the coast, plenty of snowfall as well at higher elevations. Some of that rain and precipitation breaking their way into the interior, but for the most part, the Okanagan and much of the southern interior staying dry, as well as parts of central BC over the next 48 hours. So those systems just sort of missing it and heading around to the Kootenays and sort of the Columbia's, Revelstoke, Golden area as well. Now, here on the south coast, expect, again, heavy rains at times, not like we saw with that atmospheric river a couple weeks ago, but still significant, up to 70 millimeters and up to 50 for the North Island. The east coast of the island getting spared for the most part because of that rain shadow. And here on the lower mainland, we don't see too much over the next 48 hours. Depends on the model you look at, but for the most part, it looks like we'll mostly be spared. Do expect some fairly consistent rainfall, but not anything too heavy, it looks like for now, although that could change, especially as we get closer and closer to Friday. Now here you can see that rainfall coming for the coast. Tomorrow, nothing but slightly cloudy, but for the most part, sunny skies in the interior. And if we zoom into here in Vancouver, you're ready for an extremely consistent forecast. Whoa. Same highs, same weather conditions right through the end of this week. Our lows are the only thing that change as they start to slowly go down.
Copy and paste that graphic work.
Right? Easy peasy for me.
There you go. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
A porch pirate story that will give you pause. A family that had food delivered found it bare. Stick around.
Ready.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On December 7th, join CBC Vancouver's Dan Burritt at the Alumni UBC webinar, Finding Joy in Climate Action. Experts will discuss what climate actions we can take that could also impact our well-being. And enjoy the seasonal celebration of quiet reflection and jubilant hope with Christmas with Corleone on December 15th, 16th, and 18th. Tickets at corleone.org.
There are plenty of stories about porch pirates, those folks who steal parcels delivered to people's homes. But this bold culprit, in this case, had everyone talking. A Florida family's food order made it to their house in Orlando, courtesy of a delivery person who, as you can see, took a photo as proof. Then the thief bounced. A bear was caught on camera grabbing the package, sauntering the way, leaving the family flabbergasted, probably hungry. Bold bear. That's your news at 6 o'clock. Thanks for joining us. You can watch this show on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. I will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.